Welcome, everyone. Ready to dive deep into a question that's had people wondering, well, forever. How did life begin? We've got some really cool material for this one. Really makes you think.
You know, it really is amazing. We've learned so much about the universe, about how tiny cells work, and yet the start of life, it's still this huge mystery.
Isn't it? I mean, picture this. A universe 90 billion light years across. That's more galaxies than grains of sand on every beach on Earth. Crazy, right? But here we are, this tiny planet bursting with all kinds of life. So how do we go from, like, non-living stuff to even the simplest little cell?
That's the big question, right? Because even that simplest cell, it's like a whole city under a microscope. You've got these protein machines working away, DNA holding tons of information, ribosomes building more proteins. It's mind-blowing.
It makes you wonder, how could all those pieces just appear on their own? They need each other to work. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg,
Right.
on a tiny, tiny scale.
Exactly. And that's a huge problem for any theory trying to explain how life started.
So let's get into those theories. What are the big ideas scientists are working with in this giant mystery?
Well, one of the most famous ones is this idea of chemical evolution. Life just kind of popping up from a bunch of chemicals in the early days of Earth.
Oh yeah, like the classic lightning hitting a primordial soup and zap life. That reminds me of that experiment, the Miller-Urey one, back in 1952. They tried to recreate the conditions of early Earth in a lab. And they actually made amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. Seemed like a big step forward back then.
Yeah, it was huge at the time, no question. But, we've learned a lot since then about what that early Earth atmosphere was actually like. And, well, it turns out what Miller did in the lab might not have been that accurate.
So maybe that primordial soup wasn't quite the perfect recipe for life we thought it was.
You got it. Plus, there's this other really basic problem. It's just not very likely that simple chemical reactions could just accidentally make something as complex as life. Molecules, they don't have like a plan. They can't just decide to form these crazy structures we see in cells.
Okay, break that down for me. Why is that such a problem, this idea that it's just too unlikely?
Okay, picture this. A protein made of 150 amino acids. For those to line up in the exact right way to actually work, the chances are ridiculously small. Like, imagine an amoeba carrying a single atom across the whole universe there and back for billions of years, just hoping to randomly bump into the right arrangement.
Whoa, that paints a pretty clear picture. Even with all that time, it doesn't seem like just random chance is a very good answer. Makes you wonder if there's something else going on, some other force.
Right. And that's why scientists are looking at other ideas too. Like, there's this idea of the RNA world. Maybe RNA, which is simpler than DNA, was the first building block.
Oh, I've heard of that. It's like RNA could have been the blueprint and the builder, doing the jobs of both DNA and proteins. It's a stepping stone to the DNA life we know now. But isn't RNA pretty fragile? Could it really survive on early Earth?
That's a big problem with that theory. RNA, it breaks down easily, much more than DNA. Even in a lab, it takes a lot of work to make it.
So maybe it's a step in the right direction, this RNA world. But it still doesn't explain how all that complexity got started in the first place.
You said it. It just changes the question a bit. We still need to figure out how those first molecules that could copy themselves and then change and evolve, how did they appear? Feels like every time we find something, it just leads to more questions, Like the primordial soup, not so simple.
Yeah.
The RNA world, well, how did that get going?
It's like we're putting together this giant puzzle, but some of the pieces are just missing. What about that idea that life didn't even start here, like it came from somewhere else in the universe? Panspermia, right?
Oh, yeah, life hitching a ride on a comet, something like that. It's cool to think about, but does it really answer the big question?
I guess not. It just kind of moves the problem, right? Explains how life maybe got to Earth, but not how it started in the first place. Still got to figure out that first spark wherever it happened.
Exactly. So where does that leave us? It's a head scratcher. None of the usual ideas seem to work perfectly. Makes you wonder, are there some even crazier possibilities we haven't thought of yet?
Okay, now I'm really interested. What kind of crazy are we talking about?
Well, some scientists are saying, what if our universe, it's just one of many, like a multiverse with different laws of physics, different everything. If you have enough universes, the chances of life starting in at least one of them, even by chance, get a lot higher.
So it's like saying, well, we can't explain it here, so maybe it happened somewhere else. Doesn't really answer the question, though, does it?
You're right. There's definitely some of that. And we got to be honest, this multiverse idea, it's pretty out there. No proof. Really hard to test.
I guess it just shows us how much we don't know, right? our whole universe, maybe just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah.
But even if there are tons of universes, it doesn't really tell us how that first life got going. Back to square one.
You got it. And that brings us to, well, another possibility. This one kind of shakes up how we think about science, about the universe itself, really.
Okay, lay it on me. I'm listening.
What if, and just hear me out, what if all this amazing complexity, all this life, it's not just because of random stuff happening? What if it's, well, on purpose? Like something designed it.
Wow, now that's a big idea.
Huh.
Feels like we're moving away from science, more into philosophy or even religion.
Yeah, design has always been in those areas. But there are more and more scientists taking this idea seriously, like a real scientific theory.
Really? Why is that happening, this shift in thinking?
Think about all the information packed into living things, like DNA. It's the blueprint for building an organism. So much specific, complex information. Where did it all come from? Random chance. Doesn't seem likely with those crazy odds we talked about.
So if it's not random, what are the other options?
Maybe it was built into the laws of physics from the beginning, like a pre-programmed design. But then where did those laws come from? And why would they have this information, the kind we usually connect with intelligence? Why would that be part of reality?
That's getting pretty deep, pushing the limits of what we know. So we've got random chance, not very convincing, and information built into physics, which is still mysterious. Anything else?
There's one more, and it's making a lot of waves, causing some arguments too. What if this information, this blueprint for life, was put there by something intelligent? A mind that could think of it and then make it happen.
Okay, that's definitely new territory, but isn't that just giving up? Like saying, it's too hard, so a higher power must have done it.
That's a common thing to say, but it's not really fair. People who support this intelligent design idea, they say it's a real scientific theory, something you can test and investigate, just like any other scientific idea.
Okay, I'm curious, how would you even do that? How do you investigate if something intelligent made life?
You can look for signs of design in nature. Like in engineering, we know something's designed when it's irreducibly complex.
Irreducibly complex, remind me what that means again.
It means it's got lots of parts working together, and if you take away any part, the whole thing stops working. Like, think of a mousetrap, needs all its parts to work.
Right, can't have just half a mousetrap. Are there things in biology that are like that?
People have pointed to a bunch of examples. One that comes up a lot is the bacterial flagellum.
I've read about that, it's pretty amazing.
It's like a little outboard motor that some bacteria use to swim around. What's crazy is how complex it is, all these proteins perfectly arranged. And every single one is needed for it to work. Take one away, it's useless.
Just like that mousetrap, got to have all the pieces. So what you're saying is something this complex couldn't have just happened step by step through random mutations and natural selection.
Exactly. The intelligent design folks, they say stuff like this. It makes more sense if someone planned it out, not just blind chance.
Okay, I see how that argument works. But it still feels weird to say some intelligent thing did it. Like, we're going beyond what we think of as science.
I get that, it does. This whole idea of design, it changes how we see the universe, our place in it. Maybe we're not just accidents. Maybe there's a bigger plan, even a purpose.
It really makes you think differently. Maybe this is like a whole new way of doing science, a total change.
Could be. There's more and more evidence pointing towards design. It's getting hard to ignore. This is just the beginning of the conversation. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
Wow, my brain is definitely full after all that. From primordial soup to multiverses, and now this idea of intelligent design. So much to think about when it comes to the start of life.
It is a lot, and it's a conversation that gets people fired up, for sure.
No kidding. Like, it makes us question some really basic things about science, about reality itself. I mean, for so long, science has been about explaining things through natural stuff, matter and energy. Now we're talking about, like, a mind and intelligence behind it all. That's a huge jump.
Yeah, it really is a whole different way of looking at things. But as we've been talking about, those explanations just based on matter, they don't seem to work when we're talking about the origin of life. We keep running into stuff like DNA, the complexity of cells, things that point to something more than just matter and energy, something that makes you think about intention, purpose, all that.
So it's not just how life works. It's like, why is it here at all?
Exactly. And that's where things get really interesting. If we're saying there might be an intelligent designer, well, then we start asking different questions. What is this intelligence like? What was it trying to do? How does it relate to the universe, to us?
Big questions. People have been wrestling with those forever. Are we saying science is leading us back to these ancient mysteries about meaning, the purpose of life.
I think in a way, yes. Science is all about finding the truth, figuring out reality. And as we learn more, sometimes we hit these questions that go beyond the purely physical. The origin of life, that's a perfect example. It's like we need to rethink our basic ideas about science to even approach it.
It's like we're explorers, going beyond what's in the textbooks and labs.
Exactly. And to be a good explorer, you got to be open-minded, ready for the unexpected. If the evidence points to design, we can't just ignore it because it's uncomfortable or doesn't fit what we're used to.
Well, this has been quite a deep dive. We've gone from the primordial soup to the multiverse, from the tiny details of DNA to these huge philosophical questions. I think it's safe to say we haven't solved the mystery of how life began.
No, not by a long shot. It's one of those mysteries that just keeps getting deeper the more you look at it.
So before we go, what are some key things you hope people will take away from all this? What should they be thinking about?
I hope they come away with a sense of awe. Life is just amazing. Even with everything we know, we're still just scratching the surface of how it all started. And I hope they'll think critically about these different explanations. Don't be afraid to question things, to explore ideas that might seem a little crazy. And most of all, I hope it makes them keep asking those big questions. Who are we? Where did we come from? What's it all about?
That's a great way to put it. This deep dive has left me with more questions than answers, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It sparked a curiosity that I don't think will go away anytime soon. For our listeners who want to learn more, where should they go? What should they check out?
The things we've talked about today, that's a great starting point. There are tons of books, articles, all kinds of stuff out there that goes deeper into these topics. Just keep searching, keep asking questions, and keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much for taking us on this journey. It's been really eye-opening.
It was my pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the origins of life. Keep those minds curious, and we'll catch you next time.